Alright, hi guys, this is Mrs. De La Cruz with your YouTube video for this week talking about the Arab Spring. Now remember, the Arab Spring is about the Arab people springing right into action, into democracy, and demanding what they want. And there's a couple reasons why this has started to happen. In the Middle East, your background is that dictators have ruled for decades, and these dictators have not done very good things for these countries. They've really abused their power, and they've taken advantage of the people that they rule. The people in the Middle East, in the majority of the countries, are suffering from recessions, which means that their economy is bad, they don't have enough money, extreme poverty, and unemployment. These are also very common things we talk about with North Africa as well. So this is a theme that's happening, and the reason why so many people are suffering from poverty and unemployment is because you have concentrated wealth. The leader of the country is a dictator, and a very small minority actually have control of all of the wealth in the nation. So despite the fact that the Middle East has so much oil and that the countries themselves are very wealthy, very few people are actually benefiting from the exportation of oil. What's happened with that is people are now they're doing what they need to do to survive, and they're actually now demanding more rights. So the catalyst of this, right? The catalyst is the event that pushed these rebellions, these revolts, these protests into motion. And the catalyst was actually from a man named Mohammed Bazazi, who was 26 years old, and he was the breadwinner of for his family. His mom's widowed, and he has six siblings. So breadwinner means he is the one that makes the majority of the income for his family. So because of his work, mom and siblings survived. He was selling fruit and vegetables from a cart without a permit. If you do that without a permit, it's considered illegal. Okay, so he was breaking the law, but he was breaking the law by selling fruit and vegetables, which is not harmful, so that he could support his family. And the police actually took his cart and slapped him, which is they basically humiliated him for doing what he needed to do to survive, so his family could survive. So in protest, he set himself on fire in front of a government building. Now this is very extreme. And very painful from the look of the pictures. But what this did was it started this huge movement in the Middle East, right? The reaction, right? Many Tunisians related to Bazazi's frustration. He was from Tunisia. And protests started developing across Tunisia, demanding that President Zaini El Abadi Ben Ali and his regime step down. About a month after protests started, the president, who was actually a dictator, he fled the country, and he's currently living in exile in Saudi Arabia, where he's being protected. And the successful protests in Tunisia have sparked revolutions all over the Middle East. So the people of Tunisia, they had these protests, and their president did step down, and they are currently in the process of setting up a democracy. So you have an interim government in place, which is a temporary government, and they are working on setting up elections and making Tunisia a democratic nation, which is a huge step. I believe that their president had been in power for like 33 years. It was about 30 years, a very long time. So this is a huge step for Tunisia, and as you have seen, it has now sparked revolutions all over the Middle East. The majority of the other revolutions were not as peaceful. Arab Spring refers to the democratic uprising that aroused independently and spread across the Arab world during 2011. And this really cool poster you can see on the right. This was a poster. It spells liberate, okay, for liberation. And those are the main countries that have gone through the Arab Spring. You have Libya, Iran, Yemen, Iran, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. Syria is currently in the process of fighting for this, but they have not been successful yet. In Egypt, the government was overthrown on February 11th of 2011. Mubarak, his family, and former advisors are actually going to face trial for keeping Congress along, breaking the law, things like that. You know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a very famous quote. So when somebody like Mubarak, he was their dictator, has all of this power, it's kind of a given fact that within time, that leader will become corrupt, right? Because they believe that they're invincible. They can't be touched. They believe that their power makes them superior to the people they rule. And they forget to keep in touch with those people, and they forget what it's like to be what you want to call a normal person or someone who's just going through daily sufferings, whether it be financial or health issues and things like that. You can see there you have pictures of the protests in Egypt. And Egypt, their military is currently their interim government, and they are also in the process of setting up democratic elections. And this is a political cartoon that represents the Arab Spring. You can see that on the far left, the guy in the air, the spring shot up out of his chair. Okay, that's Egypt. And that's a political cartoon of Mubarak. And you can actually pay attention by his hands. He has the arms of his chair with him. And Lebanon and Syria, their dictators are holding on as tightly as possible to prevent this from happening. Their legs are wrapped around the chairs, things like that. Right now in Syria, it's actually very, very bad, and Lebanon, they're working with it. This is an older political cartoon, but it kind of shows what you have happening. So, the autocracy that has been going on in the Middle East, and now the people are looking to go between a theocracy and a democracy. So remember, theocracy is when you have religious rule, and a democracy is a card where you vote. And so they went from autocracy to theocracy, some countries did, and now they're looking to set up a democracy. In Libya, the government was overthrown and Muammar Gaddafi was killed. You can see you have the protest in the picture on the left, you have the image of Muammar Gaddafi after he had been killed on the right, and then there on top right, they're burning a picture of Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi, we read about him, we read, he's not exactly the best leader. In Bahrain, you have negotiations with the Shia representatives specifically to release those political prisoners. Remember, Shia is one sector of Islam. You have economic concessions by King Hamad, and protests are still occurring. So they have not fully reached the democracy that they're looking for. They're negotiating for it, they're protesting for it to get what they want. Yemen, which is actually the poorest nation in this area of the world, their prime minister actually resigned. So prime minister is similar to a president. He resigned. And then President Salih signed a power transfer agreement ending his 33-year reign. Now, we know presidents do not reign for 33 years. So what a lot of these countries have actually done is their dictators have given them the title, they've given themselves the title of president to make it sound more Western, so that, when we read a newspaper, oh, President Salih of Yemen, doesn't sound, this is a dictator, right? It's not as forceful, it sounds negative. And protests are currently still happening in Yemen. They haven't had full success yet. And Syria is currently where you have the most controversy. So resignations from parliament and government officials, that word that's cut off is government, and they have released some political prisoners, but their dictator has not stepped down. You have large defections from the Syrian army, and defections mean that the soldiers are actually leaving the army and supporting the people. And clashes between soldiers and defectors, right? So the soldiers that should have stayed in the army are now clashing with their old comrades. You have international support for a new Syrian government, and it's ongoing. International support for a new Syrian government, and it's currently ongoing. You read these posters on the bottom right. The UN says, "What are you waiting for? Stop massacre." And then the other one says, "China, Russia, thank you. We are dying." So what's happening is the UN, Syria is really bad. Their leader is killing a lot of its people, and it's just the crimes are horrible, and people are dying on a daily basis. And the UN, or the United Nations, cannot step in because China and Russia have voted no. Right? The UN is a democratic union, so the majority of the countries have to agree before they will interfere in international politics. China and Russia have voted no to allow the UN to intervene and help out the people of Syria, and so because of that, more people are continuing to die. Their leader is refusing to step down, and he will continue to refuse to step down, and his people will continue to die. So there's just an image of somebody who's kind of like Muammar Gaddafi, completely out of the loop of his people, and he's killing them to maintain the power that he has, which is, in my opinion, ironic because he's their leader to protect them, to do what's best for them, and instead of doing that, he's killing them. Okay, and so that's it for your notes. But the last thing I want you guys to do is I want you to take a couple minutes in this last, 10 seconds or so of the PowerPoint. And I want you to take a look at the two political cartoons that we've already looked at but are now at the end. So after giving a brief overview of all of these different topics, I want you to look at these political cartoons and answer these two questions. How do they represent the protests and revolts in the Middle East? And what specifically from the cartoon relates to topics that we talked about in this presentation? Okay, so why is the guy in Egypt, why is he sprung out of his chair? And we didn't really talk about Lebanon, but why is Syria gripping on for dear life? So kind of go back and listen to what I've said and talk about why that happened. And also knowing what you know, right? We know an autocracy is when you have a small group of people in power, but why do we have now this coming to of a democracy or a theocracy? So what have we talked about in the Middle East that would make this theocracy democracy a debate in these countries? And what else would you know? Why don't they want a theocracy? Why do they want democracy? So how does that represent what's happening in the Middle East? So just jot down some ideas, and I will see you guys on Friday. All right, so have a great day, and I'll see you on Friday.